Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lucy and this is the fifth in a series of 4 reviews I've been doing on the music of the Blimp, the Blamp, the Blomp, or however that's supposed to be said. Today we're looking at the latest album from the minds of Dave Baxter Limp, Imaginary People. Released on the spookiest of days, Halloween, Imaginary People marks the longest period between releases in the discography that I've looked at so far. Beautiful Liquid released in February 2021 and Dave's Imagination Menagerie released in October 2021. For any other band this would be a relatively quick pace, but our boy Dave, this is bordering on unacceptable. The people need Blimp and Dave made them wait 8 months. I should point out that although Dave sent me a copy of the album early for review purposes, he offered no monetary compensation. When I said I would do it for free, he instead tried to offer me free Canadian dollars. Very curious fellow, Dave. Imaginary People has the task of following up what I thought was Blimple's weakest album, Beautiful Liquid. In my review of Beautiful Liquid, I said the album felt a bit like the wheels had fallen off the Blimpy bike. With Imaginary People, it's a bit like he's decided to leave the bike behind and instead venture forth on foot to mixed results. Imaginary People gives us a warm welcome with the frankly sublime opener I'm So Afraid, with its worryingly in-time percussion and bass pedaling keeping the song ticking over while weird blimpish style noises dominate the stereo field. The trademark Dave jamming is also back in full force with stereo widened guitars drowning out the vocals. And then, my dear listeners, it just kind of ends. It's worth noting that on the whole, the mixing and mastering of Imaginary People is far beyond the rest of Dave's discography. Every element is in time with each other, most things are clear, at least in headphones and in my monitors, which is an absolute treat when it comes to the weird musical world of Blimples. Now, I've spoken about this in the past, but this opening track put me in a worrying place for the rest of the album. Dave seems to be at his best when he takes an idea and develops it through the entire composition process. Instead, we've got a good idea here that doesn't feel like it was, for lack of a better word, finished. This opening track is another warning shot from Dave. You will get into a groove and you will find yourself disappointed when the song ends a good minute or so before it has the chance to leave a lasting impression on you. The frustrating thing about this is that the album contains some highlights from Dave's discography. Where It Was is arguably the most polished song in the album, and honestly it's up there for the most polished songs in their canon so far. Unfortunately, this little known creative technique of developing your ideas past the concept stages isn't seen too often on the album. Dave Limp's Imaginary Friends unfortunately brings up several instances of what I'm going to coin as FBC, Flaccid Blimp Composition. What is FBC, I hear you ask your monitor? FBC is the act of cobbling together several concepts that haven't been fully realised into short thought pieces. These kind of half thought through songs are absolutely rife on Imaginary People. Sometimes it's a positive as the individual concepts weren't that good to begin with and were thrown together into one song which I can just skip on repeated listens. Notably In an Instant, which never really gets going, and also No One Can See This. Sometimes flaccid blimp composition can utterly kill a song, for example in Dead Again. Dave teases us with something that borders on the beautiful, but chooses to end the concept before it has a chance to become truly moving, and stick with the listener. Speaking more candidly on the subject, I feel to a certain point this ruins any investment the listener may have in the album. As 5 songs into Dave's People of Imaginary Persuasion, we've heard 5 concepts and not a single song that sounds like it was composed all the way through. To quote an inappropriately older man I once met at a friend's party, "Life should be savoured, son, it shouldn't be wasted, also do you have any smokes?" If Dave's not willing to think these concepts all the way through for the sake of the listener, then why should the listener invest in his music? There's several highlights on Imagination Station that give me the impression Dave had a better idea in mind than what actually came out. As previously mentioned, Where It Was is an absolute highlight with interesting dynamics, lyrics, steady on-time drums, and if you can believe it, even a hook. Okiyuku comes in a close second with gorgeous vocal melodies and production leaving the rest of the album in deep water. It sounds almost like a pop song in places, something that would be best placed on the inevitable D-Blimp greatest hits. It's brought down by an extended instrumental coda that just doesn't gel with the rest of the song. Imagined Human comes very close to these previous tracks, with spooky harmonies and droning bass breaks keeping the listener guessing what is coming next, in a rare positive outcome of the flaccid Blimp compositional technique. From here we end at the noisy instrumental track Overweight, which carries itself with interesting texture work, reverb-drenched guitars and a creepy, foreboding atmosphere. Now what if I told you that the 4 highlights on Dave Limp's Imaginary Persons were all one after another in the track listing? I bet you'd be a little bit surprised, right? Well, they are. And taking these 4 tracks in isolation, that's Where It Was, Okiuku, Imagined Human and Overweight, there's a solid 7 out of 10 EP here. Something I could see myself listening to on a semi-regular basis as a lovely little curio. But they're sandwiched in between a number of tracks that just don't feel as if they had the proper care. There could have been another 4 tracks of this quality had they been given the appropriate care. Waterfill feels like it's almost there, but it unfortunately has the caveat of being the most boring track on the album, which is a shame, as the opening verse sounds like it could have been so much more than it was. The album ends with Nothing Is Real, which again sounds like a song that could have been a lot better than what it was here. Again, it goes through several stages trying to grab the listener's attention, but with an unfortunate instrumental coda right where the listener expects some cohesion. So here we are, we've gone through another Blimp album and we find ourselves at the perennial question, is this worth a listen? Unfortunately, this album lies somewhere in the same ballpark of Pink Goim, in that the highlights are very good, but the, I guess, lowlights are very low. Listening to Where It Was through Overweight will give you the best the album has to offer in this humble review man's opinion. Whether you'll enjoy the rest of the album is up to personal preference and will probably depend on how much of the imaginary Blimp man's more frustrating tendencies you can overlook for the sake of completion. Onwards and upwards, Dave.